Hi everyone, my name is Megan Swinford and I'm a social worker here at the Thompson Autism Center at CHOC Hospital. Today I will be talking about school starting up this fall 2020, specifically how to help your students and children with ASD with this transition. This short segment is intended for both parents and educators alike, as there will be tips for what to do both in the classroom and at home. So let's begin. Two of the major topics that will be discussed today is understanding the possible effects on students with ASD and how parents and teachers can help support their students. So what do we know about fall 2020 starting up? Well, as we're finding out, it's expect the unexpected. As schools are placed on COVID monitoring restrictions, this calls for students to be extremely flexible, as one week they may be remote and doing virtual learning, and the next couple weeks they may be completely receiving live instruction. This is especially hard for a student with ASD, as routines are so important for a student with ASD, and asking for flexibility in their schedule can pose many challenges. I'm going to go into the reasons why routines are so important for kids with autism. The first reason is they get order from chaos. Many children with autism spectrum disorder live in a world of chaos. These children have difficulty making sense of everyday movements, sounds, and actions. What sounds like a symphony to you may sound like white noise to the ASD child. Routine creates order in their lives. These children gradually learn what to expect and when to expect it. Routine creates a safe and secure environment in which life is predictable. Second reason, routine comes naturally. Children with ASD naturally tend to like repetitive actions. You will often notice them creating repetition themselves. This actually can be one of the main signs of autism. Routine also comes naturally to them, and it's not hard for them to learn a productive routine in the place of an unproductive one. The next reason is stress relief. Routine is known to relieve stress in almost all individuals. The child with ASD has a particularly stressful life as he or she tries to make sense of his or her surroundings. Adding routine will relieve the child's stress. Lastly, routine adds to the learning potential. Once you can help relieve the child's stress, then it's much easier to help the child learn new things, new habits, new skills, new accomplishments. Routine is a powerful learning tool in the ASD environment. So now that we've broken down how routine is so pivotal in the life of a child with autism, it becomes clear to see how the disruption in normal routines that we are all currently facing can have severe consequences on behavior. Now, the three different consequences that I want to discuss are an increase in anxiety, increase in bullying, and behavioral outbursts. Now, these are all speculations that I have based upon discussions that I've had with both educators and parents within the last 6 months that they've been seeing in both their students and children. So let's first talk about an increase in anxiety. Anxiety and specific anxiety disorders are really very common in people on the autism spectrum. For example, according to a research review conducted by Van Stiesel, Vogels, and Perrin in 2011, the results showed that nearly 40% of children and adolescents with autism were estimated to have clinically elevated levels of anxiety or at least one anxiety disorder. Now, to me, that's a very high percentage, and to think that they're facing even more anxiety with what's going on, it's going to be elevated. Now let's talk about bullying. Children with autism spectrum disorder are bullied by peers more frequently than typically developing children. The published rates of bullying in children with ASD vary considerably from 46% to 94%. But regardless, these rates are much higher than reported for typical children, and they often exceed those from other child clinical populations. The high prevalence rates in children with ASD are particularly concerning given that bullying carries its own set of adverse consequences, including internalizing problems, negative emotional responses, and psychological distress. The third concern would be behavioral outbursts. Now, these are very common in children with ASD due to social and communication difficulties, which are some of the core symptoms of ASD and are often the source of the kind of intense frustration and anxiety that results in a meltdown. Aggressive behaviors in children with autism often cause a great deal of difficulty for families. Hitting, kicking, biting, throwing objects, and other behaviors are common during a temper tantrum or a meltdown and can cause parental stress. To make things worse, a vicious cycle can begin so that behavior problems increase stress, and increased stress together result in even worse behavioral problems. Now, I think it's safe to assume that all of you are tuning in because you guys want to be a part of the solution, which is amazing. So how can we as educators and parents address the anxiety, the bullying, and the behavioral outbursts? Next, I will be giving tips and advice for the parent and for educators on how to help their child who suffers from anxiety. So first, for the parent, you want to acknowledge your child's anxiety. Explain to your child that it's completely normal to feel anxious when things are changing. Try and pinpoint what it is exactly that triggers them. That way you can help them cope and hopefully overcome their fears. Encourage your child to engage in situations that are anxiety-provoking but safe, and then praise them or reward them when they do so. Next, try and practice meditation and relaxation techniques. Just taking a 15-minute meditation break is going to do wonders for your overall health and for your child's health. You can fortunately find many of these scripts online. Next, you can try and use CBT coping strategies. According to several studies, when it comes to treating anxiety, cognitive behavioral therapy ranks more effective than other talk therapies. CBT is a widely accepted psychological approach for breaking several cycles of anxiety. It's effectively used to help children with at least some verbal abilities. So the first step in this process teaches children to identify the root of their fears. For example, a child suffering from separation anxiety may fear being permanently separated from his mother when he leaves for school. After identifying the perceived threat, the therapist can then help the individual logically challenge his anxieties with evidence. You can find a number of books on cognitive behavioral therapy for purchase online or in bookstores. For the educators, it's important to talk to parents about new triggers that they've discovered during this time period. This is going to be very helpful for delivering the best instruction for each individual child. Another option might be to give the student the ability to pick the day that they'd like to not show their screen, since virtual interface can cause anxiety in some children. A fun and creative idea that you can do with your child or student is to make a flip book for them. So this is if in the case that your child is going to be returning back to school, you can make a book that just describes what some of the expectations are going to be when they return. So you can see in this first picture, there's a picture of the kid's school, what grade they're going to be. The second page is exactly the door of the classroom and the number. And you can see there's pictures of the school bus, pictures of the hallways, pictures of the teacher. And then you can also adapt this to the time. So have pictures of socially distanced classrooms that you can actually find online. Have pictures of students wearing masks. And all of this is just really going to help that student who has anxiety really gain a good understanding and a good expectation of what school is going to look like. And in turn, that's really going to calm their nerves come when it is time for them to return to live instruction. Going along with the flipbook idea, I just think it's very essential to involve the student in the entire process. So for both the educator and the parent, try and involve them as much as you can in the process and arrangements of returning back to school, even including details that could seem trivial to most of us, such as which room they're going to go to first, what time they need to be there, how long they'll be there, why they'll be there, what will happen next, and even just a visual timetable may help. So the more ahead of time you can get something like this from the educator, the better they're going to be off. Although we can make as many flip books and get as many schedules ahead of time as possible It's also very important for children with ASD to learn how to adapt to unknown circumstances, and you can just do this by adding a question mark to their routine. This helps build space for change into your child's visual supports. For example, if you use a visual schedule of activities for your child, you can leave gaps between each picture to allow another picture to be put in later. You could use a question mark to represent a mystery or uncertainty. If your child has a written schedule, leave one blank line between each task. You can use a step-by-step approach to help your child learn how the question mark works. Your child can gradually learn to deal with pleasant change and then less pleasant change. So let's see this put in action. For example, go on an outing and place a question mark on their schedule. Make sure something fun for your child happens when it's time to do the question mark on the schedule. Then praise your child for coping. Your child can learn that something unexpected can be a pleasant thing. Here's another example. Go on an outing without the question mark on the schedule. At some point, slip the question mark into a gap on the schedule. Immediately bring out the fun surprise and praise your child for coping. All right, here's another one. Go on an outing without the question mark on the schedule. At some point, make an unplanned diversion. For example, a sibling wants to look at the pet shop and it's not on the schedule. Add in the question mark, reward your child for coping, and then quickly get back to the schedule. The final tip or suggestion that I have for educators and parents on addressing their student or child's anxiety would be to create a worry book for the child to record their anxiety during the school day. If appropriate, you can read the book together as part of their evening routine. You can help them then deal with any worries by suggesting how to cope with them in the future. So they can either write or draw their anxieties, and this is going to be a release for them, and it's going to be more insight for you and more ability for you to help them cope. The next consequence that I wanted to talk about is bullying. So children with ASD have been dubbed the perfect victims for bullying by some researchers, which is a consequence of social skill deficits, difficulties in making and maintaining friendships, emotional reactivity, and a general inability to stand up to children who bully. Often the child may resort to physicalness due to limited communication strategies. Bullying can happen both in the school setting or at home. Previous research has shown that children with autism are more likely to be bullied at school than students without developmental hindrances, and that likelihood increases when a student has difficulty controlling their behaviors, among other factors. A 2015 review of research published in the Journal of Autism Research found that 44% of children with autism reported being bullied, 10% were perpetrators of that bullying, and 16% were both bullies and the victims. Verbal abuse was the most common, but physical abuse and affecting a student's relationship with others through behaviors like exclusion, manipulation, and rumor spreading occurred in about a third of the students' cases. Researchers have noted that children with autism were more likely to engage in two-way sibling bullying, or being both a victim and a perpetrator. Children with autism experience difficulties with social interaction and communication, which may impact their relationships with their siblings. Another issue at play is that children with autism may receive more affection and attention from their parents, accentuating their basic evolutionary need to compete for those basic needs with other siblings. That is what can lead to conflict and bullying. So in the home setting, what can parents do? Parents should set clear limits with siblings or the sibling who is doing the bullying. Assure the child who is being bullied is not to be blamed. When the child with ASD is the one bullying the sibling, identifying the triggers will be important. So in the school setting, what can the teacher do? They can try and remediate through the IEP. They can also develop IEP goals to address each individual social skill deficit and develop IEP goals to address each individual pragmatic language deficit. Another form of bullying that we've seen an increase in lately is cyberbullying. According to a recent report by Israeli startup Light, reports of cyberbullying are increasing rapidly. Cyberbullying incidents increased by 70% between March and April this year when lockdown was at its peak. This is due to the fact that there is much more online time, which creates more opportunities for harassment. Make sure to analyze these social media forums to find out how to block these attackers, utilize parental controls, and also talk to your child about not responding back. Discuss the importance of not responding, since blocking a bully sends a much stronger message than getting into an argument online. You can also do this by the enactment of social stories. I know as educators, you might be looking for innovative ways to teach your children about bullying. One solution can be found in an award-winning educational game called Galaxia, recently selected as EdTech's Cool Tool Award finalist for 2020. It's a brand new interactive online game for computers, smartphones, or tablets, and it's designed to prevent bullying and cyberbullying amongst middle schoolers. Students are able to review, apply, and practice bystander skills, coping skills, empathy for others, and appropriate usage of social media use, including texting. Another way to address bullying with your student or child is by either creating a bullying chart, as you can see on the right-hand side, just to help them understand what exactly is joking or what exactly is bullying, because sometimes you'll hear the student say that this child was laughing at them, they were bullying them, and then come to find out the other student thought it was just a mutual joke or mutual understanding. So it's important for your child with autism to really understand the meaning behind what's joking and what's bullying, what's conflict, and what's a one-time thing. Other things that you can do is you can create social stories about bullying. A lot of these are more tailored to being in school in a live session, but you can also try to make this virtually too. I think that'd be very interesting. These are just some examples that I pulled from Pinterest. So the final consequence that I wanted to discuss today is behavioral outbursts, something that you're going to find more common nowadays just because children are under immense pressure and different circumstances, so you're going to find definitely more behavioral outbursts in the home. So this is really for the parent to understand what to do during this time. Understand that this is very normal. I mean, a typical child's going to have behavioral outbursts, but a child with ASD is going to have even more increased behavioral outbursts. So make sure you're giving your child plenty of space to recover from a meltdown. Let them have their space. Let them have their time to kind of cool down. And understand how these meltdowns can affect you and understand the power of self-talk. So I always say it's good if there's someone that you can talk to during this time. It's going to really help you understand how to process these sort of moments and how to de-escalate yourselves. Because oftentimes when our kids are worked up, it can also trigger something in us. So if you're able to kind of get to a state where you can help them cope, that's going to be more beneficial for them. Then for the educators, try and see ways in which you can support the parent and provide them with resources to give them extra help. Engage the child to discuss their outbursts and do a behavioral chart with the antecedent behavior and consequence. This is something that's really enacted a lot by ABA therapists, and it's really just a visual chart to show, okay, what prompted, what was the reason why you had this behavioral outburst? Let's discuss that. What behavior did you exhibit? Did you lash out verbally? Did you throw something? And what was the consequence of your behavior? And that's really going to help this child understand the meaning behind their behavior and why they reacted in that sort of way. And that's what's going to help them work on that in the future. Unfortunately, sometimes we, even as educators, parents, we may end up increasing problem behaviors, and we don't do this intentionally, but we just have to understand what exactly is causing the meltdown. Why is your child acting in a certain way? And there's definitely different reasons for behaviors. So for attention-seeking behaviors, do not try to verbally reprimand your child. Don't give them threats. Don't yell or give them lectures, because then you're giving them exactly what they want. They're not getting away with the behavior if you don't yell at them or correct them. Actually, they're getting away with it when you do, because they're getting exactly what they want, which is your attention. So it's a hard habit to break, but it's essentially a must. For escape behaviors, do not give them a timeout. Don't use timeout or breaks right after a bad behavior or a long lecture. Make sure that the student is only getting a break when they're using an appropriate way of asking. No timeout, no timeout, no timeout. Get my point? Timeout is giving them exactly what they want. They get out of doing their work. Do not use timeout with escape behaviors, because they will keep using the problem behaviors to exactly what they want. So hopefully this just helps you give an example of how a child reacts in different ways based upon what they're trying to get out of it. Now, lastly, tying in with behavioral outbursts, what happens if the child actually is doing really great? You want to make sure you're rewarding that flexibility. So communicate with family members on what rewards might be transferable to the classroom. So you know what's been working with your child the past couple months, and make sure you communicate with the teacher on what's been working. So if you notice something with his behaviors that's positive, share with them the positives, share with them the negatives, share with them any sort of like token economy charts that you've been working on or things that he's motivated by. All this is really going to help the next school year be a positive experience for everyone.